Hello, I'm Leon Jaroff, and I write for Time magazine. I also live in East Hampton, as does our guest today, Dava Sobel. Dava is a very accomplished person, an author, a newspaper woman. She has written for the New York Times as a science writer. She's written many articles for magazines. She's written a few books, the first of which was a biography of Frank Drake, who was the father of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And she has just written another book, and the book is called Longitude. Longitude? Not only does it have a title that one might not consider to be the most attractive title, but this book has been on the New York Times bestseller list for 16 weeks. A book called Longitude. Longitude, most people don't know what that is. They think it has something to do with latitude, something to do with maps. But how in the world, Dava, did you ever come to write a book called Longitude, and how in the world did it ever become a bestseller?
Well, I am the first one to admit that it is a title to strike dread in the heart, and I worried about it. But that is definitely what it's about, and I brought my little globe along, just in case anybody forgot. The longitude lines are the ones that go this way. And now we see this as a boring backdrop on the globe, but there was a time when these lines were a matter of life or death. And that's what the story is about. It's about thousands of sailors who died because they didn't know where they were, and an enormous contest with a fabulous King's Ransom prize to be given to the person who could figure out how to determine longitude at sea.
Wow. Well, perhaps our viewers would like to know, how does that correspond with latitude?
Okay, the latitude lines go around the globe this way. Just the equator is a line of latitude. That's the 0 degree latitude line. And because of the way the Earth and the Sun are oriented in space, you can always tell just by looking at the sky when you're at the equator. But the 0 degree line of longitude is just a political convention. We could put it anywhere because the Earth is doing this all the time. So that's the trick. If you're out in the middle of the ocean and you want to know your longitude, you need to know what time it is aboard ship. And you also need to know what time it is at some other place at that very same moment. Now today every stewardess has a wristwatch with two faces, and she knows the time where she lives and the time on. But this goes back to the 18th century when clocks just didn't work that well, and no clock worked on a ship because the pendulum would be upset by the motion of the waves, and even just the changes in temperature would change the oil in the clock, and it would stop going.
Well, then how did the early explorers find the various places that they found?
By good luck and the grace of God. They really did not know where they were.
You know, even the British with their tremendous fleets, and Britain is a seafaring nation, you mean they too were basically...
They too. They were limited to some very extremely faulty methods, most of which were guesswork. If you were sailing from England to the New World, say, you would keep track of your speed and try to keep track of the time with a sand glass, but the currents might undermine your efforts to figure out how far you'd gone. You really didn't know, and there were many disasters, probably the greatest of which involved a returning fleet of British warships. Now, they had won the war. They had been fighting the French in the Mediterranean. But when they got close to home, because they didn't know where they were, 4 of them hit the rocks, and 2,000 sailors were killed.
2,000?
All at once.
Wow.
So this was an enormous concern. Kings all over Europe were offering money to anyone who could figure out how to solve this terrible problem. Of course, the other thing was that since nobody knew where to go, all the ships would cluster along the easiest trade wind routes. So you'd have the whaling ships and the warships and the pirate ships, and everybody would be in the same place so they could all find each other because they couldn't really navigate.
So they basically went where the winds took them, is that it?
Yeah.
I see. David, explain to us how, by telling the time, the exact time where you are, and comparing it with the time, let's say, at Greenwich in England, how can you tell what your longitude is?
Okay. The Earth is a circle, 360 degrees around, and it takes 24 hours to go all the way around. So 24 into 360 is 15. That's all the math in the whole book. But that's the point. For every hour that passes, for every hour's time difference between you and your reference point, you are 15 degrees of longitude to the east or west.
And then you know your latitude how?
You know your latitude.
In those days, how did
In
you?
those days, it was still very easy. You would watch the sun, and when the sun reached its highest point, you could measure its angle above the horizon, and that would tell you your latitude immediately.
That would mean it was noon where you were?
Right, and the height of the sun at noon tells your latitude.
I see.
If you had cloudy conditions at noon, you could do it at night with certain known stars. So latitude was never a problem.
That was relatively easy. So this became a very great problem for all the navies of the world.
This was like finding the fountain of youth. Yes, it was an enormous problem, and it was so commonly known that people used the expression discovering the longitude the way we would say now solving Mission Impossible or turning lead into gold. Because not only did everyone want to be able to do it, everyone thought it was impossible to do. So the real story here is that along came a self-educated British clockmaker who solved the problem.
Wow.
In a way completely different from what the entire scientific establishment of Europe was trying to do. They were all trying to find a way to use astronomy to tell time. And all the great observatories in Europe had actually been founded for navigation. I always thought Greenwich was set up to do basic research in astronomy, but no, its charter is to perfect the art of navigation.
And that was especially important for Britain as a seafaring nation.
Absolutely.
I see. Well, David, what, before this genius, whom I'm sure you're going to describe in great detail, before he came along, what were some of the attempts to determine longitude? What ideas did people have?
Well, there were numerous harebrained schemes. One of them involved creating an entire fleet of ships that would somehow be anchored on the open ocean in a giant network, and they would set off cannon blasts and loud noises, and somehow ships at sea would be able to navigate by those guideposts.
By hearing those noises?
Hearing the blasts and seeing the explosions of the shells.
And the ships would have
This is a high degree of desperation.
I'll say. The ships would also have to be fairly closely spaced to be able to hear
They were supposed to be about 600 miles apart.
600 miles
But even
apart.
so, imagine the manpower it would have taken to keep those vessels at sea, and the poor sailors who got stuck with that duty. One of the greatest criticisms, by the way, of that method was how were they going to keep the sailors sober on that mission? Another idea was based on a quack cure called the powder of sympathy. And
the powder
of sympathy. And this was supposed to be able to heal wounds at a distance, so that if you'd been injured in a duel and the sword that had cut you were dipped in a solution of the powder, your wound would begin to heal.
Oh my.
Or a bit of your bandage. But the powder never touched you. And even though it didn't touch you, you felt pain when the cure was put into effect, and you also experienced healing. So what does this have to do with longitude? Someone came up with the inspired idea to intentionally injure a dog and send it aboard a ship as the ship was leaving port. And then the dog's bandage would be left back at home with some trusted individual who would dip it in the powder of sympathy every day at noon Greenwich Mean Time. So then wherever the ship was out on the ocean, the dog, of course, would yelp in pain whenever this happened, and the captain would know it was noon in London. But you have to wonder, I mean, what if the powder was supposed to cure the dog? So obviously you'd have to mutilate the poor dog more than once on a long voyage.
And I suppose there was no humane society at that point.
No, there wasn't. And I'm not even sure, in fact, I'm fairly sure that this proposal was put forward just to show the desperate straits that people were in. That nobody was ever seriously recommending doing this. However, a novel came out right at the time my book came out called The Island of the Day Before by Umberto Eco, which is all about sailing from Italy to the New World aboard a ship that uses a wounded dog to tell the longitude.
Oh, really?
So the coincidence of having not one but two books about longitude out at the same time was almost more than I could bear.
It's doubly incredible.
Only surpassed by the fact that Longitude has now come out in Italian, and the jacket blurb was written by the author of that book, Umberto Eco.
Now, I know you're going to tell us about your genius, John Harrison,
Yes.
but just before that, how do you account for this book selling so well, Longitude?
Well, of course, I like to think it's well written,
Well,
but
of
then
course,
I'm
but
a grown-up and I know better. It takes an awful lot more than that. I think one of the very important things about this book is that the publisher, the original publisher, Walker, did everything imaginable to make it work. They made a beautiful cover. I mean, I think the book has a real appeal. When you see it, you want to pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you pick it up, it actually feels nice in your hands. Even the paper, everything about it is just lovely. We've been criticized for not having pictures in the book because it's a very visual topic.
I'm sure it is.
But that would have been a different kind of book. We wanted it to really look like something from the 18th century.
Mm-hmm.
And the compromise was to have a bookmark that was actually in the first printing that showed all the different clocks that led up to the prize-winning timekeeper. Because nobody expected the book to ever go beyond the first
Right.
printing. So in very short order, the bookmarks were gone, and the book was on the New York Times bestseller list, and we were all in a state of shock. And it has stayed like that.
Well, was there a big promotional effort to?
No, there wasn't. The really big promotional effort was the copy that you have, which was an advanced bound version, not the final book, but a book to be given away to editors, booksellers, reviewers, to show that the company was really serious about this book, because this was an expensive thing for them to do, and they were a tiny family-owned company. But they wanted to be noticed. So.
And how did the reviewers respond?
Oh, well, that was the dream of 200 lifetimes, to have Christopher Lehman Hope say that I could tell a story with, it was so overwhelming I don't even remember it, something like clarity and perfect pacing.
Wow, isn't that great?
Yeah, so
there was a good review in the Times, and
Yes.
Where else can you mention, just right offhand?
the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Washington Post, New Scientist. New Scientist said that I had done the impossible and made horology sexy.
I see.
I think that was my favorite.
And horology, you might explain
Horology
that.
is the science of precision timekeeping,
Mhm.
clocks and watches.
Okay, and I just might demonstrate here that there was some promotional effort.
This is my brother's
there was
promotion.
some promotional effort made. There it is. Anyway, David, now tell us. So anyway, all these methods were tried, and then there were also a few astronomical
Yes.
methods which were tried. Can you briefly explain?
Yes, it was a
before you
very-
explain what John Harrison
Very
did?
complicated plan to map the positions of the stars and figure out the way the moon moved among the stars and be able to tell time by that. Now, it can be done, but it is extremely difficult, and it requires immense knowledge of astronomy and mathematics. And at the time, no one really knew the positions of the fixed stars. So that's why the observatories were founded, to really map the heavens.
Mm-hmm.
And no one understood the motion of the moon until well after Isaac Newton. So these were tremendous obstacles to overcome. En route to solving the longitude problem, people discovered the speed of light, the distance to the stars, the weight of the Earth, many, many things fell into place in trying to figure this
It
out.
was sort of serendipitous, is that right?
And in fact, John Harrison, who was the clockmaker who actually solved the problem, on the way to inventing a clock that would work on a ship, invented what he called the temperature compensation curve, which is still used today in the thermostat and the electric toaster. And he also invented what we now call ball bearings. And but they were just means to an end.
So actually, he decided, and what was the problem? Why couldn't somebody have just taken a clock aboard a ship, set it at Greenwich, and then observed when the sun was at its zenith, and say, well, it's noon here, let's see what time is it, and how much time different is this from Greenwich time, and figure it out.
Exactly. And in fact, in the early 1500s, people were suggesting that. The problem was the clocks weren't good enough. They would stop going.
Now, why is that?
For a number of reasons. If it were a pendulum clock, the pendulum would be upset by the motion of the ship. If it were a clock that ran on springs, either the changes in temperature would upset it, or the salt air, or the differences in gravity as you move over the surface of the Earth.
There are
that changes.
Yes.
Did I mention changes in temperature? Because
Yes.
that was a major thing. All clocks with metal parts before Harrison, the different parts would expand or contract differently, or the oil inside the clock would react to the change in temperature.
It would
and that would
thicken up or
exactly.
get less dense and change the...
And that would change the rate of the clock, and sometimes it would even stop the clock. And then there was no way to wind a clock without stopping it. And he had to overcome many problems. And he was extremely clever, especially considering he was self-educated, never even had an apprenticeship to a clock or watchmaker. He was a carpenter and a musician. And he used things that he had learned from carpentry to make clocks that didn't require oil, which had never been done before.
Really? Now, how could it not require oil?
Because he used a type of wood that was naturally greasy.
Oh.
And he eliminated the oil, and that was his first revolution.
So everyone else, at least the scientific establishment anyway, was obviously working toward figuring out an astronomical way.
Absolutely.
And here was this little clockmaker.
Right. He was a mechanic, an engineer. They didn't take him seriously. And it didn't make sense to them. Scientists like to deal with things that have a rationale. And this was a little ticking thing in a box. I mean, they didn't get it. And it just seemed facile to them. Whereas to have a method that was based on the heavens was a noble thing.
The clockwork universe.
The clockwork
right?
heavens, exactly. So that's what they wanted. And there was fierce rivalry. This was an enormous amount of money. The prize was set at £20,000.
Now that
this was in
what, that was
1714.
1714. Now
Today it's worth about $12 million. It'd be as though we said, all right, we really have to have a cure for AIDS. We're going to offer $12 million as an incentive to innovation. That's what this was.
I see.
And so the competition was fearsome, and the astronomers were also the judges in charge of awarding the prize. So you can imagine how this complicated things. Yes, yes. So I think that's, and you asked me before, what accounted for the book's success. A great part of it is that this is a story of one man against the world.
Yes.
And in a sense, he wins because he's right, and history proved him right, because within no time, his invention had completely taken over. Britannia ruled the waves because of this invention. But on the other hand, he didn't win. They never gave him all the money, really, and they never gave him the satisfaction of declaring him the winner.
And this was because of scientific jealousy?
Yes.
Or, that's
so
terribly unfair.
That's part of the story. And I think, so even if people are frightened of scientific concepts or feel this is a guy thing, women might never understand it, there's enough in there that's about basic human emotion that carries you through. Also, everybody I ever heard of was in this story. Captain Cook, Captain Bligh, Galileo, Newton, even Charles Darwin is in the story. Because the Voyage of the Beagle was really a surveying mission.
Halley of Halley's Comet.
Halley is in it, yep.
Wow.
So I had fun meeting up with all these characters in history.
Right. And actually, you went over to England, did you not? To,
I did.
To view some of these ancient or antique devices. That
Which
had been
all
built.
Still run.
They all still run. He built a number of them, is that correct?
He built a series on his way to perfecting the idea. And that in itself is incredible. It would be as though one person had invented the computer.
Wow.
And then taken it from a giant mainframe the size of a room down to a modern laptop. That's what he did.
Amazing.
So the first one stands almost 3 feet high and weighs 75 pounds. And then the last one is 5 inches across and weighs 3 pounds.
Wow. So what he did basically was to design a clock that kept excellent time
Perfect
at
time.
sea. Perfect time. Now, what sort of variation was there per day or month
We're talking about seconds over a period of weeks.
seconds? Wow. And so then this was used for an awful long time. This was what most navigators
Oh yeah, this was
used.
adopted by the Royal Navy and by other navies all over. Then we got into radar, of course, and now we have the global positioning system,
Yes.
which in a way is the most romantic ending to this whole story, because the global positioning system works on a network of orbiting satellites. So you could say that those are man-made stars, but they broadcast time signals.
Oh, isn't that great?
So
Yeah, so with a global positioning system, you can just set it up, turn it on, stick up an antenna, and it
Oh,
gives
yeah,
you
you
your
know.
latitude and longitude.
within
Is that right?
seconds,
Amazing.
makes you forget that this was ever an issue.
Yeah. Well, you know, I thought about your book when this recent hurricane, Edouard, roared up the coast, because it came over the Caribbean, and then it turned up, and it went up the 70th degree of longitude. It went straight up toward the Cape along the 70th degree, and I thought, well, how opportune, right at the time that David's book is doing well in the bookstores. And would someone be able to buy this book in any of the local bookshops?
Indeed, they've all been quite wonderful about stocking it, and the paperback is about to come out from Penguin, and that will also be available here.
Oh, that's great. And what about foreign languages? Has your publisher gone that route yet?
Yeah, the book has been translated into 11 foreign languages, and it also sold in England. And I just found out today that it came on the bestseller list in the London Times at #1. So,
Number 1? Wow.
So if I had been in a state of shock before, which I was, it's only worse.
Well, you don't sound as if you're in a state of shock, but I'll take your word for
Okay.
it. Now, why would this have gone to #1 in England, especially something written by a foreigner?
By a Yankee. I really don't know. It's their story. I mean, it is a completely English story.
I guess there was one German involved in helping, in trying
A
to
German, a
determine.
Frenchman
Right,
here, a
but it was
Swiss there, but
basically
it's really,
English
the
science.
players were all
Yeah.
English. And this story's been told before. I mean, clock enthusiasts have written it up, and there was even a very detailed, very technical biography of Harrison that came out in 1960. But it was tough going. I think what worked here is that the story is accessible, and that the book is also short. I think it's
Yes.
another of its virtues.
Brevity is the soul of wit.
It's mercifully brief. You can actually read it in a sitting.
And then just tell us briefly, Dava, there had to be some inspiration for you writing this book. You didn't go
Yes.
out one day and
No,
say,
I didn't wake
where,
up.
where am I?
Where-
At what latitude and what longitude am I?
I got invited to a wonderful symposium at Harvard, which celebrated the 300th birthday of this genius clockmaker. And the person at Harvard who thought to do it was himself a clockmaker and born in England, and had actually been the curator of these wonderful machines at Greenwich before he moved to this country to be curator at the Time Museum. But now he's teaching at Harvard, and he decided to host a symposium on longitude and invite all the world's experts. Well, at the time, when he first mentioned it to me, I thought maybe there could be 5 world experts on longitude, but it turned out to involve about nearly 500 people. Not all, some of those were attendees, not all of them were speakers, but they talked about geography, history, clockmaking, Harrison's story, and it was fascinating. And I wrote it as a magazine article for Harvard Magazine.
I see.
And then my now publisher, who was an alumnus, saw it on the cover of the magazine and
Got in
thought
touch
it would
with
make
you.
a, called me out of the blue and said, I think this would make a great
Wouldn't
book.
this make a book? And what did you
I thought
think?
it was
What did you
completely
think?
crazy. It had taken me a year to sell the idea as a
Mhm.
magazine article. And because everybody said the same thing, oh, it's weird, it's esoteric, who would want to read about longitude?
Mhm.
So after a year of failing to sell it as a magazine article, it was a book overnight.
Wow, it's just an amazing story, and let's hope that it stays a bestseller in England and stays very high up on the list here in America for quite a long time.
Thank you very much.
It's a great book, and I think this is just, I've been very fascinated by this whole discussion. And you know, right now, speaking about watches, I'm going to look at my cheap Japanese watch and say that we are just about out of time. But it really has been wonderful having you here, and I really urge the viewers to read this book. I read it, as you could probably tell from some of my questions, and I stayed up a good part of the night reading it. It was just wonderful.
Thank you so much.
So anyway, it is great living here in East Hampton, isn't it?
Indeed it is.
And it inspires good writing, I am sure of that. So thank you again, David Sobel, and much good luck with your book, and I'm sure you're about ready to work on another one. Is that right?
Indeed I am.
Credits are rolling.